Hey everybody, how y'all doing? Welcome to Howdy Partner. This is the show that we have where we can bring on APN partners to be able to demonstrate what they've been able to build and show off what they got. So today with us we have Tenable. All right, and we have AM and Chris to be able to share a little bit about Tenable. AM, Chris, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Chris, you go first.
You want me to go first? Okay. My name is Chris Edson. I'm a solutions engineer at Tenable. I've been here about 6 years, so basically almost fossilized at this point. I started up in the tech support ranks. Done my time in the trenches, if you will. Came over to the solution engineering a few years ago, and just trying to help customers specifically just get a handle or grasps on understanding the entirety of their assets across various different infrastructures. And specifically, I tend to focus within the cloud environment, which is why I'm so happy to be here.
Cool.
I'm AM Grobelny, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I used to work with Braeden and Taz, actually, at AWS. I used to be on this show all the time, Howdy Partner. My wife named this show, actually. Technically, I can spoil that now that I don't work at AWS. My wife is who came up with the name, not me. So anyway, I'm AM Grobelny. I work at Tenable as well with Chris. I am a principal solutions architect over here, working on all the cloud things, primarily AWS, obviously. And we're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about security in the cloud. We're going to talk about security of the cloud. And I'm specifically going to talk a bunch about automating some of this stuff. Chris is going to give us an overview of how you actually just get started with Tenable and vulnerability management and what vulnerabilities are and really the important things. And then I'm going to mess around with some Lambda functions after he's done. Right? So he's going to do all the hard work and I'm going to get to play with some Lambda functions. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, you two. We're excited to have you. And before we get kicked off into all things Tenable, Taz, who we have here, is going to be able to give us a nice introduction. Taz, why don't you go ahead and take it away for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were getting to know Tenable a little bit and understand a lot of what they were doing, something that came up frequently during that conversation was SSM. So AWS SSM. Super important service, and actually it works out really well given that we just finished EC2 birthday, because if you're using EC2, I think that there's a pretty darn good case that you should be using SSM as well as part of it. And so
Tenable
as well. So to give you, for those who may be unfamiliar with SSM, I wanted to just set up a quick demo real fast to show some of the cool stuff that you can do with it. So let me go ahead and pop my screen up here. So what I did before this is I went ahead and set up a couple of EC2 instances for us. And let's just go ahead and see what it was that I built. So you've got a load balancer, of course. We're going to follow best practices and everything. So if I come here to the load balancer, we have a DNS name that we're able to access, and I have that here. So let me go ahead and pull that up. And let's see here. Okay, there it goes. The page isn't working. Oh, crap. So what do we do? Fortunately,
you get somebody who's not Taz to set this up.
You
right?
get someone other than me. Honestly, they should have known better.
Can we get Braeden to set it up? I think Braeden might.
I don't know. My go-to is just to go get Taz. So I think we got some kind of cycle here.
Yeah.
Circular dependencies. Okay.
Well, I know that it can't possibly have been anything that I did wrong. So I mean, like I basically created this from a CloudFormation template, so it should have just worked for me. So like let's see here. How would I go about debugging this? Well, let's go back to these EC2 instances and let's just see like what did we even do to start off these instances. So let's go to instance settings here and let's look at our user data real fast. Well, we're just running some basic PowerShell scripts here. So that seems fine. But obviously something's going wrong. So we'll just like SSH or RDP into this thing. Let's just try and get access to that PowerShell. Let's do something with it. So let's go back to this instance settings. And let's see here. If we scroll through, we are in a VPC. Let's see here. This isn't where I wanted to be. I wanted to be on this page here. Let's go here. And well, as we go through, we'll see that it's in a private subnet. So that actually makes it really difficult for us to manage. Like if we want to be able to access and run this, I mean, there are ways, obviously, that if you needed to access the instance itself, you could do. But there's a better way than the traditional method. And that's actually one of the things we want to show with Systems Manager here. So to do that, we're just going to pop on over here to our SSM console. We've got a bunch of great options here. But what we're going to start with here is a session manager.
Taz, could you please use the full name of Session Manager, not just Session Manager for me, please?
AWS Systems Manager, Session Manager.
Thank you.
Sorry if that was confusing anybody. And we're going to go ahead and start a session here. And well, this is fantastic. This is what I was hoping to see here, because we should be able to just click here and start a session. What's this look like? Hey, that's exactly what I was hoping to see. I now have access to PowerShell to be able to make the changes that I might want to make. And what's cool about this is there's an agent just installed on the instance already that is very helpful for this, but also a lot of great things that you're able to do, which we'll talk about later on in the show. And so to diagnose this, because we're in a Magic Lab world, I know where the error is, and fortunately know exactly which logs I want to view. And oh my gosh, error. The role service or feature name is not valid. Web server. Well, dang. I think that when I was filling this thing out, Braeden forced me to make a typo, because obviously the answer to this is it should have been web-server. So that's definitely on Braeden, this manager. And so
Sorry, everyone.
it's rough sometimes, but you know what? The great thing is that we do have AWS Systems Manager run commands, using the full name for you there. And we can very easily.
Thank you again.
Oh, absolutely. We can do this. Let's go ahead and do. We'll just do shell. PowerShell. See if we get what we want. And yep, I want to run some PowerShell scripts because I have a few instances there, and obviously there is an option which I could do, which is stop the instance, go in, edit that, or I guess I could actually, I wouldn't want to need to necessarily stop it, but I could go in and I could make the changes that I need to change by just running a PowerShell script through this systems manager. And that would be fine if I only had one instance. In this case, we have two. But, and two is not necessarily that hard to go in and do. But if you're thinking about this on an enterprise level scale, you'll probably be dealing with much more than just two instances. And so if you do want to make a change to a multitude of EC2 instances, this is a great tool to do it. And one thing that I really, really like about this is that you have the option to choose it by tag. So you may or may not have noticed earlier, but I had several instances running in my account outside of the two that we want to deal with here. And so the cool thing about that is using tags, we can actually go here, and I gave this one a tag of role with a value of web server sans hyphen. So, all kinds of inconsistencies on this. So I'm sorry about that, you all, but we'll be able to fix this. And then what we'll do is we'll write a command for it. And so the command we'll write is basically the same thing that the instance was supposed to do when we started it up, but we are going to include that that web server there, or that hyphen in the web server name. Then we'll just scroll down. There are a lot of other options that you can definitely play around with if you'd like. But for the sake of this demo, we're just going to go ahead and click run. Now, immediately what you'll see here, which is pretty cool, is you'll see that according to the tag, we were able to find a couple of instances here. Let's just choose one of those. Make sure that it's the instance that we're looking for. And let's see here. We would be able to view this as it goes to run. But basically what will happen at this point is for the next few minutes, it will go through and it'll run this. Now, the hope is after it runs and restarts and does whatever it needs to do, my website here will work. Now, of course, it hasn't finished quite yet, but here in just a few minutes, it should. Now, what's cool about this is, this is just one example. We went in and we're trying to debug our instances. Something that's super useful about this as well is when you are working with EC2 instances, is you want to treat them with as little, treat them as unspecial as possible, much the way that I treat Braeden. And what I mean by that is you don't want to be going, I think that using the AWS Systems Manager, Session Manager, is a great option for going in and trying to maybe debug what's going on in a set of instances. But the second you go in and you start making those little changes here and there, you may forget what you've done. It won't necessarily scale for you very well. And hopefully your instances are going to be spinning up and spinning down on a regular basis. And so beyond just fixing and debugging these single situations, you can also add up things that allow you to do regular patch updates. You can do just several other things. And so what you can do is if we come here, within the node management, we can see honestly all kinds of different things. If you want a single pane view to look through some compliance type stuff, if you do have anything like that, you'll have that here. I'm very happy to report that I do have 2 compliant resources, which is fantastic. Again, you have automation, you have change calendars even. How powerful is that? Is if you know that something's coming up, you may not want to just push those changes immediately. As we all know, the best time to push any major change is Friday evening. And so you want to make sure that you're not accidentally doing that on a Monday time when you have a chance to recover. So, with the change calendar, you can go ahead and push those, schedule them, and make sure that you do it. You can also schedule maintenance windows as well. There's a lot of really great things for change management. You've got your patch manager, state manager, just a lot of really cool things. And basically what you need is just to have the SSM agent running on the instance. Fortunately, that does come on many of the AWS EC2 instance types, but you can also expand that beyond just EC2 itself. So let's go ahead and check here, see if my website is loaded. It hasn't quite yet. That's okay. My run command is still in progress, which always makes me feel better. I probably should have checked first if this was done before checking the website, but we are still running. And let's see if we can get any more insight onto that command. We do have the command description. Let's click in here. Still don't have any output or anything like that, but this should run here in the next little while. And I don't want to take any more time just rambling on here. I will update you all as soon as I notice that this go through. But I would like to kind of, bump a question over to you all from Tenable. So obviously, Systems Manager is a great way to manage your EC2 instances, but how does that relate to what you all do?
You're never going to believe this, Taz. You're never going to believe this. Seriously, never.
Lay it on me.
I took what you just demoed right now. I took the video clip of what you just did. I sent it back in time, actually. and a bunch of our engineers and solution architects at Tenable watched your demo back in like last year, 2020, probably like July-ish timeframe.
Yeah.
They saw you present just now.
Wow.
And they said, very much like the scene from Back to the Future, where, hey, you know that new sound you've been looking for? It's your cousin, right? Marvin Berry. Right, no, Marvin Berry's who he's calling. Anyway, you get where I'm going. It's exactly what we were looking for, and we already built a product for it, actually, because I sent it back in time. Remember? So
right.
We launched it back in December. Hey, server error. There you go.
We have a server error. You know, it's
So that means it did something.
It did something. Well, we've done something again. My PowerShell scripting is not necessarily.
Don't worry.
I'm not here to demonstrate that.
I cut it as soon as I started telling you. I cut it. So they just saw the good parts. I sent it back in time. Our engineers took it and they started building what's called frictionless assessment. And we're gonna talk about that. Chris is gonna talk about that specifically. So we already built it just because of your wonderful demo, Taz. Mark that as like a design win if you want. I think is what you can count it. Like in the past, right? Like we can go through the time, distillation of how that happened. I'm happy to talk with anybody who's gonna maybe rules lawyer you about if that counts as a design win. But look, I also had no idea we were going to be following EC2's birthday celebration. And, Chris and I came here, I guess we have a gift for EC2 on their birthday.
What'd you bring?
I didn't even know, but I didn't even know we would be the party, but we've got a gift, and that's vulnerability assessment for EC2. We're going to keep EC2 safe, right, in this very dangerous world that we live in. Through vulnerability scanning. And Chris is going to walk us through some of that as well. But, we're live, right? We're actually here. We could prove it if you want us to. Audience always loves to prove that we're live. Shoes on the head and whatnot. That's how they used to have us do it when I would do this with Nikki. But yeah, please put your questions in chat. Tell us what you want to see, what you want to talk about. But Chris is going to lead us through, what is vulnerability assessment? What is vulnerability management? Why are we scanning EC2 instances? How is it a birthday present to EC2 to scan EC2, right? Like, I think it's a pretty nice present, I would say. But yeah, Chris, you want to take it away? We can get into frictionless afterwards too, and answer Taz's question once we kind of. Like, what is Tenable? Like, what does it do? What are we here for? Take it away.
Yeah, sure. So first, before I get into that, I do have to mention one thing because I thought it was really weird that you talked about Back to the Future. When I did a frictionless deep dive for our internal group and some of our partners, I actually used Back to the Future as my.
It's my favorite movie.
It's amazing. So anyway, I used it as just one of those talking points throughout the entire presentation. So I just figured I'd throw that up there real quick. But anyway, let me just pull this up to kind of get this show started. Okay, cool. So Tenable, who are we? We are the leader in the risk-based vulnerability management space. So within cyber security specifically. And I'm assuming everyone can see my screen.
Yep. We just put it up there for you.
Perfect. Thank you. We specialize in presenting asset information across a wide variety of different environments. Right on premise, we made our name and our bread with Nessus. Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. It's a traditional network-based vulnerability scanner, and you effectively give it a target IP address in terms of what you would like to scan. And it'll throw network packets and understand and analyze the responses back, right? We'll log into the system, assuming we have solid credentials. We'll be able to run local port enumerators, software enumeration. And from that information, we can tell you a whole heck of a lot about that specific system or that asset, right? And you can see here in the traditional world, 10, 20 years ago, IT was all we really kind of focused on. you're talking about your desktops, your laptops, your servers, all those types of things. We can tell you a ton of information above and beyond vulnerability information. I mean, I've had a numerous amount of system administrators or vulnerability analysts tell us that some of their non-security minded folks come to them for some details around the systems that they're scanning, right? Because they can't get that level of detail with other tools. We do compliance as well. So if you look at like best practices and configuration hardening guidelines, right? You can take something from a CIS or a DISA-STIG and say, hey, this system should be configured in such a way that maps to whatever framework that you're trying to adhere to. And we can say, all right, all these settings are a pass or a fail or some other sort of manual check. And here's what you need to do to fix it. And that's kind of the beauty, right? I always look at Tenable as like, we made our name out of Nessus, but we're really at the ground level, we're a research company, right? We put a lot of might and resources behind researching and providing actionable data, not only data, again, about the vulnerability, the system itself, what to do to fix it. So obviously within the vulnerability game, things change constantly, right? So we need to understand not only the context around the vulnerability, we need to understand the risk of the vulnerability. If you look over the past 10 years, the amount of CVEs that have been released across that time period have just been going up and up and up, exponentially, right?
Yeah,
and
Chris,
a lot of
not to interrupt, but what's a CVE, right? For somebody who's not coming from the security world, right? What is a CVE and what information does that give us?
Yeah, CVE is an industry standard in terms of reporting. So it's a common vulnerability exposure number that's attached to any vulnerability. And it's funny, if you go to like NIST or MITRE, just Google MITRE, you'd be able to search all the information around that CVE or that specific vulnerability. And there'll also be like, what's the word I'm looking for? If there's a vulnerability that isn't actually there, they can be sort of like assigned to something that hasn't been reported yet, right? So then like Microsoft comes out and says, all right, well, we know that like Patch Tuesday is coming around the corner, and we know that all these different vulnerabilities have been reported to us. When we release the patches, we're also going to release all this information around every CVE that the next update would address.
Yeah, some of the CVEs are allocated to the future, even, right? Like speaking of time travel, right?
Allocated. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
They've got CVEs that date all the way out, into next year, because they know they're going. That's the way of the world, right? There are going to be vulnerabilities next year, probably more than there were this year, right? That's just as the research gets better, as the teams get better at identifying vulnerabilities. The level of disclosure of that vulnerability goes up as well. So I think the two things go hand in hand, right, Chris?
Yeah. So I was thinking like, there's more stuff out there to take advantage of, right?
That too.
There's a significant monetary thing behind the scenes that's driving this, right? And then there's bug bounty programs, there's better research and reporting platforms. So that whole like exponential upward trend of reporting vulnerabilities is just going to continue, right? And the goal of that is to really understand like, oh my God, I only have 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, a few hours to fix something. I don't have time to fix hundreds and hundreds of thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities, right? I may be able to do like a quick Microsoft patch and push that out, but there are certain things that especially in the development environment that have to be tested to make sure that the next update doesn't affect what that system is being used for.
From the sysadmin side, right? Like you're probably dealing a lot with packages on a host like EC2, right? And that's what we're going to primarily be talking about. But even as a developer, you may have seen this too. Whenever GitHub runs Dependabot and lets you know that your Node.js package has a bunch of outdated Node.js packages, right? Like, look, as somebody who's not deep seated in the security world yet, who's just joined a security company for the first time, I put this in terms that I understand in the developer world. When I just run npm audit, for example, against like a Node.js package.json file, and I get back a list of like, all of these things are vulnerable, right? It's very easy just to go, oh my God, I don't know what actually is vulnerable in this list, right? It's a best effort type thing where, it's much easier to address when you have a system in place that tells you this is the risk score. If you don't fix this, like, this is the potential outcome. Taz definitely just doesn't fix anything, right? Like you just risk 0 for Taz, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Is 0 good or bad?
But yeah, CVEs are actually rated as well too, right? CVEs have their own risk factors, and we're going to find out. Tenable will give you some more intelligence on top of that risk factor as well. We have our own rating system that really helps you cut through some of this noise that Chris is talking about. Like, I've got a limited amount of time to patch a limited amount of things. Where do I focus, right? Sorry, Chris.
No, you're good. No, I appreciate the back and forth, right? So, and it gives me a break to think about what I want to say next. No, but that's exactly where I was going, right? And I only have a few slides here, but I really want to kind of help you understand that, yes, this is a problem. We can't just give somebody a 3,000 page PDF report or, thousands and thousands of line Excel spreadsheet telling you what to do to fix certain things. If you can really narrow the focus down in terms of like what are the actual riskiest vulnerabilities that are going to affect my company or my organization or my workflow, oh my God, it's so much better, right? If I can narrow that down and turn it into like a sniper rifle, if you will, rather than a shotgun blast, all day long, right? I'll take that. I want to go after the biggest, baddest vulnerabilities that are actually going to make a difference within my environment. And because of that, we've really focused back to the research part, right? We've doubled down on building threat intelligence and this research into understanding the dynamic nature of the risks that are being carried by these vulnerabilities. There are vulnerabilities out there that will never be exploited, right? They just go through the process of being reported, and then they fall into some sort of common vulnerability scoring system standard of, hey, this is a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's critical, but no one's ever going to exploit it. There's no threat intelligence telling us that that's the case anyway. So what is the point of wasting your time? Unless it's built into like a superseded patch or something, that's not a big deal. But really focus on the ones that are being taken advantage of and exploited in the wild today. And because of that feedback, we've been able to build some of this into like a customary, a proprietary scoring algorithm, scoring method. It's called vulnerability priority rating. It's something that you get within the Tenable, I'll go to this one, the Tenable exposure platform, the Tenable IO platform, our enterprise products, just to give you kind of an overview of an architecture and kind of what that looks like. Tenable IO, it's a cloud-based, it's a SaaS-based solution, vulnerability management solution, and it's actually built and hosted within AWS. So kudos. Yeah.
Nice.
Can you believe it? So on top of that, the way that we get data, right? It's in the Tenable cloud, but we have to, in terms of on-premise, hybrid environments, cloud-only environments, we have to have a way to farm that data, right? So, and in a traditional sense, that would be a Nessus scanner. And we still use Nessus scanners. Nessus is a golden standard in the vulnerability space in terms of what we've been talking about. So, hey, if I'm in AWS and I want to get a quick look at, what my vulnerability state is like across my EC2 instances, let me throw a Nessus scanner within, a VPC. Let me throw a few Nessus agents, which are just localized versions of a Nessus scanner. And then also, we're going to be talking about this mainly in this stream is frictionless assessment. What and how can we rely on cloud native technologies within AWS, specifically Systems Manager, to get some of that great juicy vulnerability and asset details.
You said Taz's wake word, Systems Manager.
Systems
I
manager.
thought you were talking about juicy.
No,
yeah.
Systems Manager is his wake word. Yeah, I mean, and if you head over to Tenable.com and you look under the products, you might be greeted by a lot of things that you're not sure where to start. You're not sure what each thing does, right? And we'll talk more about what what those are, Chris has already given us a really great intro to Nessus, for example. Nessus sits at the heart of a lot of the technologies that Tenable offers. Tenable IO is basically where, it's a dashboard that you can log into to centrally manage a lot of the other things that you'll be doing with the other products. So for example, Nessus or frictionless assessments, right? You'll be able to go and manage in Tenable IO your scanners, your scans, your assets, that type of thing. But like Chris said, Nessus itself, in order to do a scan, you might have to have either Nessus or a Nessus agent deployed on the actual EC2 instance itself. But that's not always true with frictionless, right? We're going to see what frictionless does for us to get rid of some of those agents. It's not always feasible to deploy out more software on an EC2 instance, right? But essentially, what at the heart of vulnerability assessment itself, you got to collect data about these EC2 instances to even find out what's vulnerable, right? So that's step one. And having one of those agents or Nessus or even frictionless, as we're going to see, that's step one, right? Really, I should say step zero. You have to be able to collect data about an EC2 instance before you can even assess what's vulnerable, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Knowledge is power.
I can't disagree with that. I think you're right. But to what end? To what end? What will you use that power for, Taz?
To secure our systems, man. That's what I'm here to do. To understand
deliver-
I
vulnerabilities.
actually have a quick question. So you've mentioned frictionless assessment. I guess to Tenable, what does frictionless mean? What does that entail?
Yeah, why is it friction? What is the friction?
Yeah. What is the friction, and how do you make it frictionless? But more so, let's talk about what is the friction right now.
Yeah, friction is when two surfaces rub together and
All right, there you
generate
go.
heat. I'm joking.
Normal force times coefficient of friction, I believe, is the formula.
Don't spout off math at me. That's so offensive, Taz. How could you dare?
Sorry.
You know I don't know math. Come on. That's so upsetting. No, friction in the vulnerability management world, and please, Chris, jump in and correct me anything I misstate here. It's essentially having the dependency of deploying one of these agents to one of these hosts that you may not be able to do that to, even to begin with, right? Like these may not be systems in which you have access whatsoever. So, the friction there is getting that software deployed when really, like, at the end of the day, think about outcomes instead of, I have to do this because it's software. The outcome you want really is a vulnerability assessment of your host. It doesn't matter how you get there, right? You don't care about steps, 1 through X. You care about the last one of how do I get to that vulnerability assessment of my EC2 instance. And traditionally, it means deploying an agent to that EC2 instance. But with frictionless assessment, we're actually going to make use of the SSM agent that's already deployed in the majority of Amazon vended machine images, right? The AMIs. So yeah, Chris, I guess that's our cue to talk about frictionless.
Yeah.
Right.
So no, you did a great job. Like friction, it's especially in the vulnerability management space, and then you add in the cloud, paradigm, right, where things are spinning up and spinning down. It's really hard to get, if you have a scan window, or if you have, a change control window you need to adhere to get a scan, you're going to miss things, right? So first understanding the inventory of what you have, right, and then getting a vulnerability assessment done on it. So that's sort of the problem statement that we went out to try and solve. And, working with our senior architects, AWS architects, we came with this sort of solution to, hey, let's, to AM's point, we can't always get a Nessus agent on here. We can't always get credentialed scans or host a scanner in certain environments or certain accounts within AWS. Maybe let's take advantage of some of the cloud native services, in this case, Systems Manager, that in most cases, the agent's already installed. Let me just piggyback on certain things and run what I need to run to collect an inventory I always call it like a digital piece of paper, right? Give me a list of things that are installed, libraries and packages, and tell me the version of them, and then I can reverse scan or reverse assess back to a known vulnerability, right? We grab EC2 information that via systems manager. We grab metadata around that via discovery using CloudTrail and EC2 describe calls, and then we connect natively back into the Tenable IO account, where we can then send that unnormalized raw data so that we can normalize it and scan it. That's frictionless in a nutshell.
And when you say AWS SAs that helped, you just mean Taz, because I sent that video back in time, right? Like
Taz and only Taz and his
I can take absolutely no credit for this. I will not.
No, Taz was not involved, unfortunately.
No. Nothing beyond time travel.
I don't know. That's if you want me to get into what that looks like live, we can do that. But Am, you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I'll just throw in some commentary as we go through the setup. Like the SSM parts that actually a lot align exactly with what Taz was showing us. Instead of you having to build out all of this infrastructure plus get all of the data over to Tenable to run against its own vulnerability database. And, you don't have to do that, right? It's all set up for you through things like CloudFormation we're going to see, and SSM documents and associations. And, it makes connections to S3 buckets that you don't have to worry about. And it just works, right? So to Chris's point, EC2 instances are going to be flying throughout your AWS account, right? It's so easy to spin up EC2 instances, and it's very easy to get, to a place where you don't know what EC2 instances are even running. And that's also something even beyond vulnerability assessment itself, just an inventory of what's running, who's running what, in terms of EC2 in my AWS account, right? That's something else Tenable can help you with through frictionless. Sorry, I'm rambling.
Thank you. No, that was perfect. So, Chris, do we need to put your screen up on stream right now?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go through. Yeah, I'm going to go through the setup for frictionless assessment. I'm going to quickly just kind of show you what Tenable IO looks like. This is, AM had talked about a dashboard to kind of understand the risk within your environment across different environments, cloud, on-prem, hybrid, et cetera. You look at it from like a vulnerability assessment and management perspective. Like I need to manage and understand the assets that I'm in charge of that have potential risk or exposures to my organization, and then do something with that data, right? And in a perfect world, you would be patching that or taking it offline to fix or what have you. But if you drill into a lot of these different things, I talked about the vulnerability priority ratings, at the outset here. If you look at the common, if you're not in security, the common vulnerability scoring system is just a score to rate, how risky a vulnerability is from 0 to 10. Vulnerability priority rating is just that score on steroids, right? Because it bakes in a lot of threat intelligence and a lot of the Tenable research behind the scenes. But if you drill into this, you can get a lot of different detailed information around specific vulnerabilities, right? You can see like when they're active, when they've been patched, or when they've been fixed, when they've come back via like resurfaced or someone wrote a patch back, something like that. And then if you can say, all right, well, this is my CentOS systems. I have 8 of these. VPR is 9.2. CVSS version 2 is 10. We kind of agree in terms of the criticality of those specific vulnerabilities. And then we can drill in and get even more information. This is really where I see like the bread and butter of Tenable, right? We provide all this great detail around what you should do to fix it. And then, plug in output. Plug in output is my best friend, right? This is specifically checking the endpoint in a traditional sense, right? We're going to get into frictionless assessment here in just a minute, but I'm looking at, what is the installed package, i.e. vulnerable package, and what should it be in order for me to address and remediate that vulnerability. So that's just a quick high level overview of like what Tenable IO looks like. There's a million other things that we can do. But I do want to get into the setup for frictionless assessment, because again, if you can't always get an agent to farm that data or a Nessus scanner to grab that data for us to present this vulnerability or the asset information, let's lean on something more cloud friendly, right? In this case, frictionless assessment. So let me do, so we're going to go through the setup, right? We're going to talk about the theory here, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like. So step one, you need to make sure you have systems manager and the SSM agent configured on the instance. A lot of times I'll have customers say, hey, I'm not showing, my EC2 instances aren't showing in the fleet manager within systems manager. And 9 times out of 10, it's either it doesn't have an agent on it, an SSM agent on it, or it doesn't have a role, right? An IAM role for permissions required for that. So it's the first couple things that I always check, right? So let's go ahead and do that. And I believe I already have the role here. Just gonna double check.
Yeah, that role is just SSM actually needs permissions to be able to reach into your EC2 instances and communicate with them.
Yes, and it's the Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core role. And I actually have it applied to my 4 running EC2 instances. I have a Red Hat, a Windows 2019, Amazon Linux 2, and a Ubuntu 18 box. They all have, I can just verify that specific role applied. If you already have a role, or if this instance profile role is already being used, just attach that managed policy into the existing role. So these are there. These are all set and ready to go. If I'm in Systems Manager and I come down to Fleet Manager, I can verify that they're communicating with those EC2 instances. And it looks like I have 3 of them. So I'm missing the Red Hat box, which means most likely somebody here on the stream, help me out. What am I missing?
A role or the SSM agent or
the agent. The agent. I don't have the agent.
Or do you let Taz set this up for you? Maybe
that's probably what it was.
So let me ask you this real quick. Why do you think I don't have an agent on the Red Hat box?
I imagine it might have been a custom, something that an image that you created yourself and wasn't necessarily one that you brought down from Amazon or AWS's repository of AMIs.
So that's what I would originally think. But Red Hat, for whatever reason, and actually Patrick told me that Patrick, one of the SAs at Amazon, told me a reason I just can't remember. Red Hat is one of the only ones that doesn't have the SSM agent pre-baked. So you just have to do some sort of a script to get that installed.
Which you could run through
SSM,
but you can't actually because SSM is not installed. So
right, yeah.
But you could, you just install the agent and then you can rerun it through SSM if you would like. Just to get the satisfaction of it saying already installed. You know,
beautiful.
Oh man, that's good. That's good. I actually did run a bootstrap script on this, and I must have had a leading or an ending white space or an extra character return or something weird. So it just didn't take, but no worries.
Really, in reality, just to give people like the real answer, you would probably do this in the init script, right? On the actual instance, you could just have as part of the init script that runs when it boots up. Yeah, the user data, exactly.
So the first thing we want to do in preparation is make sure the way that we're identifying instances, EC2 instances that we want to assess for vulnerabilities is via what we call a tag, right? In AWS, you have already tags that you can use across the entire service or across many different services. And from a Tenable perspective, we're going to build out programmatically the systems manager association using the tag that you give us when you're setting up the integration, right? The frictionless assessment connector. And so for all of these, and I'll do Red Hat as well, but just for this purpose, and I'm actually going to use a default tag. So this is Tenable as the key, and then the value is just going to be FA. So I'll go ahead and add that. So that should be good. Let's click tags, and we can probably just do a refresh here to confirm that. And while that's going, I'll go to the next step. All right, so configure Tenable.io keyless within AWS for the AWS connector, which is the AWS integration in Tenable.io. We make it a little bit easier by providing a CloudFormation template that's sort of pre-canned or pre-built out with all the necessary information and permissions that we would need to do the programmatic work of building out the systems manager document, the association, and then that resource data sync. You don't have to use it at all. You can use a number of other ways like Terraform, I think I put in here. And then also, you can also manually do it. But effectively, it's using CloudTrail permissions, a few CloudTrail permissions, a few systems manager permissions, and I think it's like an EC2 describe permission. So if I'm in Tenable.io and I navigate to the settings page, go to Cloud Connectors and click on Create Cloud Connector. I'm going to do the AWS keyless setup, one that's a security best practice, right? Rather than using a keyed setup. But two, it's the only way to use frictionless connector. So let's do frictionless. Okay. My account ID, which I think is this. Let me just double check. Yes, 204. Okay. And then this is where I can create a stack. I believe I actually already have this role. So if I click this, I should get an error. Yeah, so my Tenable.io connector role already exists. But effectively, if I do this and I'm authenticated into AWS, it should provide me a CloudFormation template with all my predefined permissions and setup for my my role and my policies.
I think that's
So
really I think that's really powerful, actually. Like the fact that you as the user still have to go in and click the deploy of that CloudFormation template to create those roles and everything, as opposed to some of the other ways of potentially accessing an AWS account through a user or something like that and giving an access key, secret access key. It sounds like this is a lot stronger of a way to connect.
Yeah, it's using role assumption and that trust relationship.
Cross account roles. That's
cross-account roles.
that's the APN way right there.
Absolutely.
All the APN essays love when you use cross account roles. They all get their wings. Like it's when a bell rings, right?
Absolutely.
If you use cross account role as a partner, you have contributed to an AWS SA getting their wings.
Well, from a security perspective, that's the best way to do it, right?
It is.
So yeah, I mean, when we had Key, that was great. It was a short-term sort of thing for us. We were really focusing on the role assumption and the trust relationship. So now that we have that, obviously, kudos. This section is really just the advanced settings of the connector. You don't really need to mess with it, but if you needed your unique container ID of Tenable.io, auto discovery is for discovering accounts. So AM, I don't know if you're going to talk about Control Tower after this bit, but this is really cool because if you have new accounts that are spun up on a fairly frequent basis, you're not going to have the role applied or built out unless you automate it, obviously. So you can, by turning this on, you can catch failures in terms of we tried to assume at this lower account and we're failing because the role doesn't exist because it's a new account, if that makes sense. So anyway.
Yeah, that's Taz's other wake word, Control Tower.
Control Tower.
Taz loves Control Tower.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's super powerful. But anyway, so I'll skip that part, but let's go ahead and click on save. We can mess around with the schedule. This is basically just imports schedule. So how often are we querying CloudTrail for state changes? I think you can do like 30 minutes, but I'll just leave it set to an hour. And then just jump back over here. All right, so add the tag and save. So we put the Tenable and the FA key value pair in there. Basically what that does is it tells when we go to build the systems manager association, we build it using that key value pair, right? We adjust the discovery settings as needed, and then we save. And this is really where the inventory collection process starts to begin, right? And this may or may not be more information than you'd like, but just to give you a heads up in terms of the things that we do in the back end, literally within probably like 15 seconds. We create a specific S3 bucket path that the unnormalized data is actually going to be stored in the Tenable.io account. We have to encrypt it, right? So we create a customer-specific KMS key. We create the inventory collection document. This is the document that we use, and we tell Systems Manager, hey, these are the things that we're going to be doing to collect the necessary information to run vulnerability scans against. The association, the state manager association, this is that sort of like binding or contract or agreement between the document and then the tagged instances. And then, of course, we have to establish our resource data sync to get that data out. We have to collect the inventory, and then we have to transfer it over into the Tenable IO account. If that makes sense, I'm going to continue on and show you what that looks like. All right. So, and I have an error. And you know why I have an error? No, this is good. This is good. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is a trust relationship at some other account, I believe. So let's go ahead, and if I click on this. Yeah, so I'm getting good details here. So let's go back into Systems Manager and click on Documents. We'll see if I have. So I have my Tenable inventory collection document. This was built out programmatically with the role that we assumed, because that role that we built out, I already had it built out, but when you use a CloudFormation stack, has the ability to write or create a document, right? And this is the document. The second thing is the state manager, the association. Tenable Inventory Association. Look at this. I had 3, right? Because we had 4, but I didn't have SSM agent on one of them. So 3 of them have been successfully associated with, right? And then finally, my resource data sync. So if I go to inventory, and by the way, we're only using the inventory. So from a systems manager perspective, there's no additional cost, right? I think inventory is free. And the resource data sync. So this is effectively how we're extrapolating the inventory data out to Tenable land, Tenable AWS land, so that we can start running scans against it, normalize it. There's a whole different process that we do on our end, but then present to you those assets and vulnerabilities within Tenable IO. All right, so we're good. This error is simply because I have another account within this organization that I don't have the role at, right? And so I'm failing. Yeah, exactly. It's telling me. So that's a good thing. I'd have to scroll through to see where I can find that error. But anyway, if I turned that auto discovery off, I wouldn't have an error here. And let's go ahead and look at any assets that we may or may not have found. Okay, so I found 4. These are 4 assets, and we know it was 3 Linux and 1 Windows. I don't have any vulnerability information yet, and that's okay. That's just Systems Manager pushing out that raw data to us, and then we're just having to normalize and scan it. So it could take a couple minutes. But if I drill into this, I can see all these great details, right? EC2 instance ID, instance type, AWS owner, which is the account ID, the region, a bunch of different things that we can get from the EC2 describe call. We have a tagging system. So based upon the data that we get back in this asset information section, we can do dynamic tags against it. You can see it already has a ton of tags, and this thing has only been alive for a number of 3 or 4 minutes or so. And then once Systems Manager provides us that details, the inventory details, we can run vulnerability scans, and then the vulnerabilities will just show up under this tab here, right?
I have to say the tagging feature is actually pretty slick. I think tagging is a feature within AWS that I'm often tempted to ignore because it's just so easy to just click through. It's like, no, I'll worry about tags later.
Always.
But like they really are so important, and I think it's pretty cool that it's actually like creating a lot of those things for you so that you can keep track of your resources. Because
Taz, how dare you? How dare you not tag your resources?
Every single time. So yeah, we actually have a question coming in from chat if we have a second to answer it.
Yeah,
and it says, can you run vulnerability scans if the EC2 instances don't have public IPs?
You better believe it.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. So number one, doing it through frictionless, right, is utilizing the SSM agent. Doesn't matter if it's public or private EC2 instance whatsoever, as long as SSM agent is installed. If you're not using frictionless, all you basically have to do, which is something I'll show during my portion, is have either a Nessus scanner that's linked to your Tenable IO account in the VPC alongside and can get through a private IP address, SSH access, for example, with Linux, or RDP for Windows, or an agent actually installed on the EC2 instance itself. So there's a lot of options basically on how to get collected data and then send it up to Tenable.io. Sorry if I jumped on that, Chris.
No, you're good.
I knew it.
All over.
No, that's
He
good.
is so excited. He's just so excited. He's all about that.
He's hungry.
That SSM.
Someone skipped lunch today.
I did. I had my bars, my protein bars or whatever they're called. Like, I don't eat food anymore.
Just protein bars. Just protein powder.
Yeah, I'm real swole.
No, man, I'm almost done. I promise. But yeah, if you look at like, I go back to the what do I call it? The assessment buffet, right? If you want to use the connector, that's cool. If you want to use SSM to get vulnerability data, that's great. If you want to use Nessus, a Nessus agent, I mean, we'll tell you right down here, this system or this asset has been seen from multiple different avenues. In this case, the connector and the Nessus scan. But I've had 4 or 5 different asset techniques see a individual asset, and here's an SSM one down here, right? So anyway, this just takes a couple minutes, and if I look at my systems or state manager, we can say that it is successful. It just takes a few to kind of go through some of our processes. That's all.
Sure.
But that's it in a nutshell. If there's no failure or anything here, we're good to go. That's frictionless.
Nice.
One of my favorite ways to get vulnerability details, right, on an instance, especially in the cloud environment, because things are spinning up and spinning down. And if you have that tag, right, that you use to configure a Tenable.io connector, we will capture that within, I think it's like 5 to 10 minutes or so. So you're getting pretty close to not have to worry about setting up specific scan windows to get insight into those assets.
And I bet our management and governance expert, Taz Miller, would have some ideas on how to enforce tagging, even though he's a large tag fan.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm a fan and neglector. And so what you captured, though, is exactly right. I think most people, when they're working, we're just trying to get our job done as quickly as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, things like tagging, inventory tracking, that's not really that exciting when it's compared to maybe writing your code. And to some degree, unfortunately, security often falls by the wayside as well, especially if you're developing something new. You just want to create something and go. And so, yeah, from a governance perspective, yeah, I'm terrible at remembering to do tags and stuff like that. I'm terrible at a lot of the things, which is why I love the tools in place to help me not be bad at the things that I do. And so, we do have things like, Control Tower, which allows you to have guardrails and stuff like that to actually enforce policies and make sure people are following best practices.
And you can see I got my first SSM here for the Windows Server 2019 data center. So
is that actually vulnerability information?
Not on this one. This one's super clean. So if you look at the frictionless scan information, so it's very, very young in terms of the amount of plugins that we have that would correlate to Windows 2019. But so we kicked off 136 different plugins against it, and there were no vulnerabilities detected. And that can be common, especially if you're using like latest and greatest off of the marketplace. It really depends on what types of OS that you guys are deploying out there, and if they're if they're older or not kept up to date.
Something I could appreciate is the asset details for a vulnerability where it does actually have a vulnerability. I appreciate the fact that it has a description, because sometimes, man, those error codes can be pretty vague, right? And you find yourself scouring through the Stack Overflow and all that, and you're copy and pasting all sorts of stuff. And so just the fact that you have a description of what that is, not only for yourself, but to be able to communicate to your superiors if necessary, this is what's going on, and this is what needs to be done. It has those answers for you. You don't have to go and scour the internet for it. It just tells you what you need to do.
Braeden, I do not believe there's anyone superior to you. So I don't think that exists, but okay. We had a question in chat too, and this is a really interesting question that I spend a lot of time thinking about, especially for the future of Tenable and what we do and how we address things like this. I have my opinions. I could talk through what I think first, Chris, and then you can tell me where I'm wrong if you'd like.
Let's do it.
So I question whether or not there is any efficacy in scanning pods in a Kubernetes cluster itself, because pods are even. So look, I hate this analogy so much because I'm a vegetarian, but they call it cattle versus pets. I hate it so much. So
I use the metaphor Braedens versus AMs.
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure who qualifies as what in that. So that's an unclear analogy. I like coffee mugs versus Starbucks cups, right?
Okay.
Or sorry, coffee chain disposable cups, right? Like basically you're treating server like the traditional way of treating a server is to treat it like a pet, like something that you love and nurture. And if it goes away, you have a funeral and you're very sad, right? The other side, it's just disposable, right? If you break your coffee mug, you're going to be upset. But if you drop your coffee cup from coffee chain number X, which is not a number, it's a letter, you're not going to care, right? It's not a big deal. So the same applies to pods in a Kubernetes cluster. Pod goes down, like, who cares, right? Pod goes up, who cares? I think it's more beneficial to scan the image that the container the container image that the pod is based on, more than it is the actual running pod itself. Or, there's a couple other things that I would suggest here too. There are tools, Tenable does not have one at the moment, that scan at the network level of Kubernetes. So like Kubernetes, as you may or may not know, has its own configurable network layer that you could bring a custom network interface that you've built. Calico is one such thing, for example. And that can help you scan at a network level, for example. But I think you can get what you're talking about through scanning the container images themselves, which we do have a product for. There is a container security product through Tenable's umbrella of products, or from scanning, obviously, the hosts that are running the Kubernetes cluster as well, right? Like, because there will be underlying EC2 instances running your Kubernetes cluster, arguably not in the Fargate world and things like that. But even if you're running EKS just traditionally, there will be some EC2 nodes that you definitely would want to scan. And that's where you would have agents installed or a scanner installed. Chris, what am I missing? What are your thoughts? Kubernetes is a huge space, and I think it's an important one to understand from a security perspective. What do you think, Chris?
No, I think that was a great overview. So it goes back to the and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, is there sort of a point to scanning ephemeral, whether they're EC2 instances or a running container, right? And yeah, it goes back to what's the blast radius of these things that are being deployed, right? So if you have an image or an AMI that's vulnerable to some critical vulnerability, there's no way for you to understand if you have an auto-scaling group or something like that. If your organization is reliant upon scaling up at high demands, there's no way to know how far and wide that critical vulnerability will extend out across that environment, right? So being able to not only detect the asset, but also understand the vulnerabilities that are affecting said asset at the image level or at the running instance level can be very beneficial.
Yeah, generally scans are a moment in time, right? Like that's what they're meant for. It's what did this asset look like at this moment in time. It's kind of one of the dimensions of scanning, right? Like it's scanning an asset, that's one dimension. For a vulnerability, that's one dimension. At a specific moment in time, and that's the other dimension, right? So you move across these dimensions in the sense that vulnerability, like given an hour in the future, might not be there anymore because you've patched it, right? So it's very difficult, I think, to manage that last dimension of time with pods. And that's why the actual image that is spinning these pods up, right? The Docker image or container image rather, is the better scenario of taking a measure of where this was, because, that's why Kubernetes exists, right? Is to enforce. You can, but you shouldn't be logging into a Kubernetes cluster either through kube control or what have you, and then changing pods manually, right? Like everything should be declarative, and it should be happening through templates and container images. So that's where your true source of vulnerabilities would exist, is that image that's getting created. My opinion, but yeah. So we have another question come in.
I have a question while you're doing that. Why do you say cube control when you can say cube
Cuddle.
cuddle? Cube cuddle.
Cuddle.
It makes me feel a little bit warm and fuzzy inside, and I need more of that in my life.
So the last question is, I'm just gonna look. Taz, the next time I see you in person, I'll give you a hug. Okay, I can tell you need it. It's okay.
Thank you.
I'm happy you were. This is terrible. I shouldn't do it, but I'm happy that you were willing to be vulnerable with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to chat, and we have a question. How do you go about patching the container images? I'll kick that off to AM.
Sure, yeah, and forgive me, I'm new at Tenable, so I have yet to dive into our container security offering. But in theory, what I would assume, and Chris might have better insights here, is you get basically like these are the packages that are outdated on your instance, on your container image rather, and you need to update them essentially, and that would either be running it again through your. If you have pinned, that's the other problem, right? In your Docker file itself, you may not have pinned a version. So every time you run build, you might get a new, like the latest version type thing. If you have a pinned version, obviously you want to increase that version to a secure version identified. But yeah, Chris, what am I missing?
No, I mean, like if you're looking at my screen right now, we effectively give you the same information, right? So we'll do it's done the same way in terms of like we're not actively interrogating anything with the container security tool. We're taking an inventory of the container and what builds the image, right, into your running containers, and then we're working our way backwards to known vulnerabilities and exposures. So if we know in this case this version of libx is vulnerable to something. We'll tell you what it is and what packages to update, and then you just add a new layer on top of that with the updated version.
It may even just be as simple as changing the from line in your Docker file, right? Like, so that's the base image that you're building off of. And if that's a vulnerable instance of Ubuntu, for example, right? Like you would just change the from Ubuntu 18.04 to Ubuntu, 20.04 or something, whatever the secure version is, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Maradox I don't know if that's how you say that.
What if it breaks something?
Oh yeah, I mean that's why vulnerability patching is not a
automated thing.
Not an automated thing in all cases, right? Like you often have to deploy things and test, but tools like Tenable give you the path of knowing what's worth investing the time to go in and spend the time to test, right, and deploy updated versions of things, right? Again, we were talking earlier about the VPR score or CVSS score in terms of like the CVEs and things like that. These are indicators that we give you to say like this is worth your time, right? This is worth the level of effort that it is going to take to patch this, because if you don't, and in the case of VPR, we take into account actual exploits in the wild, right? Not just theoretical. Like, is this thing theoretically exploitable? Sure. Okay, that gives a certain level of risk, but are there people actively doing this? And, we have evidence that this is happening. Well, that's going to raise the risk level even higher because that makes it more real and less theoretical, right? So that's how you approach these things in my experience is you're not going to fix everything. And as soon as you do, there are going to be more things to fix. So it's really about determining what are the things that you need to fix and what are the outcomes if you don't fix them, right?
Versus accepting it, right? Accepting the risk. I was just, while you were talking, I was like, yeah, we highlight exploitability information. And then if the vulnerability priority rating is given, because if it has a CVE, it's going to have a vulnerability priority rating. In this case, 6.7. So what is that, a medium, I believe? Why is it a 6.7, right? Here are the key drivers, right? It has 30 to 120 days recency that the threat was seen, very low intensity, just a proof of concept, decently old vulnerability, but the product coverage is really low. Here, this is pretty important too, though. The impact score. The impact score, the highest that an impact score from CVSS v3 that it can be is actually 6. So what is the impact to the organization or the asset were it that this vulnerability is taken advantage of or exploited? So it's pretty high, right? And then here's the key. There's no recorded events from our threat sources that we pull in. So we look at this as a, not something that I would have to run and patch right away, right?
Man, you weren't joking about the whole research company portion. This is some pretty crazy detail, right? This isn't something you just Google and be like, hey, when was the last time someone saw this? Like you actually have to go and spider around the internet to figure out if that actually has been used.
Yeah, this is super cool. That's all I got. If you have any other questions, let me know. But AM.
Yeah.
Show. Okay, cool.
You got it. Yeah, you'll notice that they didn't hire me into the research team for a reason. They're very, very smart people in our research team. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to talk through. Actually, it kind of ties into at least part of the question that we were just talking about. What if it breaks something, right? How am I supposed to do this in an automated way? And I think the first thing I'll say is that AWS's code pipeline has a manual step for a reason, right? Like there is, if you're unfamiliar with code pipeline, it's the orchestrator that sits on top of the code suite for AWS, where you're doing automated pipeline builds of software that you're going to deploy somewhere. Code pipeline gives you the option of having a manual step, right? Mm-hmm. Like that, and that's for a very directed reason, because there are many things in software that can't be automated entirely, right? There are things that can be automated, but there's still going to be human interaction and human intervention, I will call it. And that's what I wanted to talk through in my portion is how do we get automated? How do we get things into a place where, I can automate some of this? Maybe what should I automate? How do I do it? And we're going to talk about one of my favorite friends. Taz, Braeden, can you guess what we're going to talk about?
Yeah. Oh, Lambda.
Yes. Lambda.
Oh.
Sorry, Taz. Just like how Chris said that his best friend was plugin output and not me. My best friend is AWS Lambda and not you. You're a close runner-up.
The application for the legal change of name is in, so it's only a matter of time before I am AWS Lambda.
Wow. That's some copyright infringement that I think you're going to have some problems with, but I say more power to you.
It's up to whoever approves that stuff.
Yeah, totally. So I guess I will. I'll share my screen, and let's see what I've got cooking, other than a complete. What do you call it? A complete mirror. Oh no, I navigated it away, so you don't get to see the mirror. So I've also got. I've got Tenable IO as well.
I have a question before you get into here. Why were you punching your screen? I feel like you have a touch screen.
I don't. No, I don't.
That's-
I wish I did. I gesture too much.
Yeah, that's what it was.
You know, the Polish are known for their gesturing, right? I'm just kidding. That's not a thing that the Polish are known for. I'm Polish. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about. So Tenable has some APIs, right?
Mhm.
And Tenable has spent a lot of time, specifically a guy named Steve McGrath. If you don't know Steve, he's awesome. He's really great. They call him the Wizard, actually. And he wrote a lot of what's called PyTenable, and it's our Python SDK. So we're going to be using PyTenable. We've got to read the docs here. PyTenable has a GitHub account too that you can go check it out. We're going to do a couple things with PyTenable in Lambda functions. I'm going to maybe teach you a little bit about Lambda, a little bit about PyTenable, maybe a little bit about Love. I don't know. We'll see.
If only we could be so lucky.
So we're going to automate some things like, Chris was mentioning frictionless and how easy it is to start detecting new instances starting up, things like that. But what if we were taking this from a more traditional Nessus agent or Nessus scanner approach? And how would we automate those things? Like an EC2 instance started up, I want to run a scan using a Nessus scanner against that instance. So I'm going to talk us through how we're going to set that up. I'm going to start us out very simple. So we're going to start with how do I start a scan from the API, basically. Once you can do that, sky's the limit, right? You can run some step functions. You can do all kinds of things that I've been thinking through. But one of those specifically is how do I automate when an EC2 instance starts up in a VPC and there's a scanner in that VPC? How do I get that scanner to scan without me having to touch anything? Taz, do you believe I can do this?
I believe you can do anything.
There's too much positive reinforcement on this channel.
I feel like I started off the episode very negative against you all, so now I've got to balance it out.
You're swinging it back around.
Yeah, just
okay.
At the end, I hope you just feel very mediocre by the end of this episode.
Okay,
that's fair.
All right, that's perfect. That's how I feel about most things in my life that I'm concerned with, mediocre about. I am. Okay.
So yeah, no, I have a feeling, and mostly because I know you've used Lambda in your day. You've dabbled in that, and as I see here, you've also opted to go for Cloud9 as your IDE.
It's the best IDE there is. What other choice is there?
None that I can think of.
Okay. Definitely not.
Does chat know? Does chat have any preferred IDEs?
What are your preferred IDEs? I'm doing this for my buddy Richard Boyd. Do you know Richard Boyd, Taz, or Braeden?
I'm aware of his existence.
He used to be in chat nonstop in Twitch, and then they gave him a job because he was in Twitch chat so much. So anybody watching, that's how you get a job at AWS, I think. Anyway, so I told you we're going to start out basic and slow and just get a scan going, right? Like, how do I launch a scan? Here's the other deal too. If we go into the UI over here for Tenable IO, scans stick around. Like, this is something that's important to. You can remove scans, you can delete them, but like, even though I create a scan, there is an ID for that scan, and I can kick that scan right back off again. So when we come in here and we define out what a scan means, right? Generally speaking, that's going to be a set of credentials. It's going to have a scanner, maybe. Like there are a couple of things that we could do instead of this. You could target a scanner group, for example. And this is where Chris is going to definitely stop me when I say the wrong thing and correct me. I'm hoping. But look, I've got a target in here. This is a scan I already built, either through the UI or through the API. It doesn't really matter. But this is scanning. This is a local IP address, isn't it? right? Not a public IP. So that means that that scanner has network access to that local IP address. And this was a question in chat earlier too. How do you get access over there, right? There's a number of ways. You can have a scanner per VPC. You can have another one of Taz's best friends, Transit Gateway, right? To make all those connections between the VPCs happen so that I can go and get basically an SSH route. So if wherever your Nessus scanner is deployed, if you can SSH into what you're going to try and scan, you're golden, right? You're good to go. That's the other thing too that I was going to mention here. There are credentials that you can embed in here. And I'm actually going to show you how to set up a set of credentials. I probably won't do it so that I'm not leaking keys everywhere. But basically, you can come into the Tenable UI and come make credentials that are reusable in multiple scans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's skip forward a bit, okay? I'm going to show you. I've got a bunch of instances here. Got some Jira stuff in here. We've got a Cloud9 instance. Actually, that's the Cloud9 instance that I'm using, isn't it?
That's your IDE, man.
That's it.
It's where the magic happens.
That is where the magic happens. I don't know what kind of magic, but oh, look. Does that IP
That
match?
looks familiar.
Does that IP match actually?
236.
Oh my God, we're scanning Cloud9.
How's it
All
looking?
Right. We'll see. We'll find out. So let's just say I wanted to scan this Cloud9 instance on a schedule all the time, or from other places. Maybe I need to scan it from my build pipeline as part of I want to make sure that my developers aren't using anything that's it's got vulnerabilities on it, right? Who knows, right? Who knows why I do the things that I do? Not me, definitely not me. But
victim of fate.
If we wanted to set up our own API, right, and manage the keys, so that's one of the things you see here. Just like AWS, we've got an access key and we've got a secret key. You go create these again. There's documentation we can link to. We can go ahead and create these keys in Tenable.io and then use them somewhere. Looks like we haven't done a recap this entire show, have we?
Nothing beyond the banners that Braeden has been very vigilant about putting up at the bottom of the screen, but that is a great point. To Jono2222, welcome to the episode. This next segment is dedicated to you, and that segment will be to describe what we're here to do. So today we're here with, so this is Howdy Partner. So if you haven't been on, haven't watched the show before, we invite some of our APN partners to come and highlight the great work that they do. And today we're fortunate to be joined by Tenable, and they're going to be talking about vulnerability management with Tenable. Braeden is spot on with those banners, man. Ooh. Like that was fantastic. And so right now, AM is demonstrating how we may be able to automate parts of this process. So yeah,
totally. And Tenable's got a lot of products that are all within the vulnerability assessment management. If you've got questions about a specific product, please drop them in chat as I'm talking. Chris gave us a really great lead in with frictionless, but now we're talking of more along the lines of how do I utilize a deployed scanner that's sitting in a VPC rather than using frictionless, for example. Really, what I'm trying to get at, the point of this whole thing it's going to be to show you how to set up your own automations utilizing AWS Lambda, and how do I get a Lambda best prepped for utilizing Tenable.io's Python library called PyTenable. What do I need to pull out of Tenable? Where do I store it? How do I get it working in Lambda? Those are some of the basic questions that we're going to answer through this portion. So I've already identified here, Taz, we've got an access key and a secret key. When I've got those types of things and I need to use them in a Lambda environment, where do I go? What do you think? How do I access this?
You just flash them for Twitch to see.
Okay.
And ask them their advice. No, there are a lot of ways that you can store these, but the way that basically what I would do is I'd go through KMS. I would go ahead and store this so that I can access it through the the KMS API.
Okay, so you're telling me not to just like jam these into my actual code.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, I would recommend not putting plain text passwords into your code. Call me crazy.
You're crazy. You made me call you. I didn't want to. So I've gone in and set up with Secrets Manager, right? And this is a very popular question too. I'm sure maybe somebody from chat will drop this in. If not, we won't talk about it. But what's the difference between Parameter Store and Secrets Manager, right? We can get into that if there's anyone interested in it. I feel like every time I mention Secrets Manager, we get that question. So if you're interested, please drop it in chat. I'm happy to go in the differences. But yeah, basically, I'm not going to show you my secret value, but I've gone in and created ahead of time a Tenable Secrets storage area in Secrets Manager so that I can utilize this across more than just one Lambda function, right? Like I'm just going to be able to either one, and you'll see which route I took. One, I can call it direct from code, right? And pull these access keys, secret key, direct from Secrets Manager, as long as I have a role in Lambda to do it. Or two, and this is the route I went. If we open up my basic scan template here, I'm actually using a built-in function inside CloudFormation to resolve that value directly into an environment variable for me. And what's even cooler is this TIO _ access _ key is an environment variable that Tenable is aware of. So I don't have to do anything in terms of library setup. Like that's it. As you can see, if I open up my first basic scan here and I come into app, this is where I instantiate the library. It's nothing, right? Like there's no access key, nothing. It detects it from the environment variables that I've hooked up into Secrets Manager. So that's tip number one. Free of charge, nothing to do with Tenable. All to do with AWS Lambda. But this is what I would do for basically every single Lambda function that I was going to write that featured Tenable in it. Any questions? Anything? What do you think?
I think that this is great. It avoids us from, it helps us avoid accidentally pushing our code to a GitHub repo or something like that and finding out that we accidentally, published our secret key or our access key or secret access key. And yeah, I think that this is super slick. Didn't realize, I'd never thought of using, or I didn't know much about the TO access key, that designation. So it's pretty cool that it integrates with Tenable.
Yeah, totally. Tenable is smart enough to pick up where that environment variable is. So next, you might have noticed right up here at the top, Braeden, have you seen this before? Transform AWS serverless. This doesn't look like CloudFormation to me. I mean, it looks like CloudFormation, but
I don't think I can't say that I have seen that before. I mean, it sounds like a very like a CloudFormation, but I have not yet seen a transform in it.
Let me tell you about it. If you'd like to know.
I'm dying.
If not, I could just drop from the stream now too.
I'm dying to know.
It's up to you. All right. So AWS has built this really cool thing called SAM. So let me see if it's dash. Yeah, I don't know if it's dash or just version or what. But SAM is it's a couple things, but primarily it's a CLI tool for more easily building serverless applications. That's what the SA stands for in SAM, serverless application. Yeah. And as part of the SAM framework, if you'd call it a framework, CloudFormation supports, back in the ye old ages of 2015, 2016, when Lambda first had come out, you had to construct essentially, you had CloudFormation, right? And you had to construct essentially everything in CloudFormation. So basically, if you wanted your API gateway and your Lambda function to be connected, you had to write all of that in CloudFormation. Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. To tell you about how we walked, both ways to school up a hill covered in snow, and all kinds of things that old people like me talk about. But now with SAM, circa probably 2018 or 2016, I don't remember when it came out. We can just do these things with CloudFormation transforms, and SAM will come in and create this stuff for us, and it will link it up. So this events thing that I have here is telling me how I want to invoke my Lambda function. We're going to see this change when I start talking about monitoring EC2 instances instead. And so what we got here is an API, right? That's all we're doing is creating an API. If we go look at the code, when the API gets invoked, we pull in a scanner ID. I told you scanners can be created reused, right? Just by ID. So I'm also making that just a static. This is actually the scanner ID that points to my Cloud9 instance. I already set everything up. And all I'm doing is, hey, if there's no scanner, cool. Let's say we couldn't find the scanner. If we find it, let's launch it. Let's run a scan, right? Mm-hmm. So utilizing SAM, you can run a couple commands. There's SAM build -- use container. There's SAM deploy -- guided. These are both very helpful. So if you never used SAM before, these are pretty foolproof ways of getting started. I've already run all these things. I've already got an API. Let me actually just go pull that up. Let me get the endpoint. Actually, it might even be in my history, my bash history. Yeah, it's already here. I don't even need to go look for it. So as soon as I press enter, that's going to invoke my function. What we got back returned is data from the Tenable API telling me this is the launch UID, right? So this is the actual ID for the scan that just launched. If we go into the Tenable, remember we were looking at that scan earlier.
You had a list, but I'm going to guess we have a new one.
No, it's not new. It's
or a pending one, something at the top. Oh,
now it's just it's kicked off. It's running. So I mean, literally, this is the like I said, I wanted to start us out with the most basic thing that you would want to do, right? Is launch a scan programmatically.
So how does that work? So I mean, a scan returns information, right? Mm-hmm. To when you click into that, like if you've run a specific scan multiple times, does it just append the scan at the end? What's that look like?
We've got this history.
Okay.
So remember I said that one of the dimensions of scanning anything is time, right? So you want to be able to track across time. And typically when you're doing vulnerability management, I would say the most important time is right now. The past is somewhat interesting. The future is definitely interesting, but right now and what's vulnerable right now is generally what most people are thinking about when they're doing vulnerability management, right?
Sure.
If something was vulnerable in the past, you might need to know that for compliance reasons. You might need to know that for a number of other reasons. But as a practitioner or somebody who's going to have to patch these things or actually use the data, you really are more concerned with what does my environment look right now, right?
Sure.
I might be misstating that too, Chris. I don't know if that's they're definitely.
No. You're hitting the nail on the head, as they say, right? So the only time, like if I'm trying, the justification piece is where I care about history, right? Like where was I 6 months ago when I came on board, and where have I gotten us to today? Like retroactively looking at the things and the steps that I've taken to prove like, hey, I am doing something here, right? We're making a difference.
Yeah. So you probably want to get a little bit more complicated. What do you think, Taz, Braeden?
I don't know. This is pretty complicated stuff.
Well, I'll tell you too.
Let's turn it up just to see. Let's just show them what complicated really means.
Yeah. The other thing
Thank you,
too,
security freak. I like your username there in chat.
I'll say this as well. This already is not bulletproof either. The code that I've already written, there's a lot of improvements to be made here. For example, what I would build out from here next would be a step function, probably a step function workflow to go and check the status of my scan, because we already saw the status was set to pending, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to want to know when that's done, right? So I basically what I would go build next is a poller using step functions to go, there's a get status endpoint that I can hit in Tenable. Give me the status of this running scan. If it's not completed, wait, right? Because step functions let you do a waiter, and then wake up again in a minute and check again. And as soon as all that's done, maybe I publish that to an event bridge bus. Maybe I publish it to an SNS topic. There's a lot of different things you can do. But right now, it's going to throw an error because my scan's already running. So the actual response from Tenable's API right now is a 409 conflict because you've already got one running, right? Like you've already launched the scan. Yeah. So instead, there's still work to be done with this one, right? But you asked for something a little bit more complex.
Yeah, because I mean, you promised us some automation, but right now it looks like you still have to go in and hit that API, right? Like so.
Well, this is where I give you the disclaimer. I'm giving you the tools to go build the automations. I haven't built all the automation
got it.
For you necessarily, Taz.
Got it. Having an API available, those is super nice because you can link it with whatever you want.
Totally. And Taz definitely just wants me to build everything for him. I think that's kind of the feeling I'm getting.
You're not doing anything else right now.
Anyway, so like I said, there's more to build out there. There's even more to build out too. Like I magically had a Nessus scanner deployed out right to that VPC. What happens when I have a new VPC? How do I go deploy out a Nessus scanner there? Right? There's still automations to be done there. I'm just trying to give you ideas at this point. And just a little self plug here. Come on, check out github.com/AlanMichael. I'll post some stuff there as I'm working on these automations, and we'll do blog posts and things from the Tenable side too. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more complicated. So as you can see already in this SAM template, we've got a different event type, don't we?
Ooh, we do.
Yeah, and I really wish I could conjure one of my BFFs just by word, but I don't know that I can. This says CloudWatch event, but really, shh, don't tell.
I won't.
It's Event Bridge.
Ooh.
Who loves Event Bridge that we know?
I think Mo does. For those who have watched the show previously, Mo is an Event Bridge. It's his thing. He loves it. It's his best friend.
Yes. So I'm using Event Bridge. And Event Bridge lets you tap into CloudTrail, for example. And as events are populated through CloudTrail, you can have Event Bridge actually capture that event and trigger, in our case, a Lambda function that runs on that. What's super cool, like more cool than this about Event Bridge, you can actually publish events cross account. So I can have as one account sitting as the receiver of events and publish every single EC2 state change from another account directly into maybe a central management account, right? Event Bridge is super powerful. I understand why Mo loves it so much because it's great. What I'm doing here is I'm listening for EC2 state changes, right? I mentioned when I started talking that we were how do I detect when an EC2 instance starts running and how do I scan it automatically, right? I'm going to walk you through that. We've already got a state, right? Running. This supports all the different states of an EC2 instance. Happy birthday, EC2, by the way, just as an aside.
Birthday.
Happy 15th birthday, EC2. Bringing another present.
It's driver's provisional permit, right? In a lot of states.
That's right. It's absolutely right.
I
Learner's
believe up
permit.
in Idaho, you can get a full license by 14, if I remember correctly.
It's very specific Idaho law that
Yeah,
you know,
there you
Braeden.
go. I
I'm
used to
very
live there for a
impressed.
short time, so.
Okay. Anyway, so the other thing that we're going to be doing.
You summoned him. He's
You
there.
summoned him. There you go.
Uh-oh.
My
I did it.
bridge senses are tingling.
I did it. I'm so proud of myself. So I'm using EventBridge to capture when my EC2 instances are spinning up. And again, like I said, I can even do this cross account, which is wild to me. I love it. You'll notice I've got the same variables that we were using before from Secrets Manager, right? To load in the keys to work. Now, the code here is going to be a little bit more complicated. All right. So as a part of the EventBridge event that gets sent to Lambda, we're going to get some details about what just happened. Really, all I care about is that the state is running, which I did that in my selector, basically at the template level. I said, only give me running events. I don't care about anything else. So I don't have to worry too much about that. What I do need to get is this instance ID, because I got to figure out a couple things. I got to figure out, number one, which VPC am I in? Number two, do I have a scanner deployed to that VPC already? Can I get that instance ID? And I'll show you just one idea of how to do that. And number three, do I have direct connection to do an SSH, connection into my my box that just spun up? Probably not, right? Because I'm just spinning this up. The security group that I have for my scanner is not going to necessarily have access to port 22 in the security group that is getting spun up in this new instance, for example, if it is a new instance. Everybody following me so far? Like I said, it's going to get a little more complex.
I think we're good.
Keep it going.
If you have any questions, chats, put it in. We'll be happy to address them.
Yeah, and let me know if we're running short of time too. I know we're getting close.
I think we started a little late, so I think we can go a little.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone after us right now.
Yep, we're good to go on for a little bit.
Awesome. So
all
like
night long.
2-3 more hours, is that?
I've got nothing else to do. Well, as long as we can transition into the Howdy Partner cooking show, at some point I do want to cook some dinner.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we're gonna pull that EC2 instance ID for the. I called this the 2scan instance, right?
Okay.
So this is the instance that is transitioned into the running state that I actually want to scan using one of my Nessus scanners that's been deployed already ahead of time to the VPC where this new EC2 instance is running. And now I'm calling describe instances here to get more information about my scanner instance, right? And everything else is basically just traversing the JSON object that comes back from the AWS API, right? So there are a few things that I'm going to pull out of this. I'm going to get the security group ID because I have to edit that security group, remember?
Yep.
I want to get the private IP address because once I have the security groups adequately set up, I want to actually scan something. And to scan something using Tenable, you have to know either the public IP address or the private IP address. But since I'm setting up the SSH connection between two instances that in theory are in the same VPC and should have traffic reachable to each other, I'm going to use the local or private IP. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Cool. And then I'm also getting the VPC ID, right? Where am I actually running so that I can then go identify, do I have a scanner instance deployed there? And can I use it, basically? All right.
So basically finding its name and address at this point. Where within your cloud, your VPC, where is it in all the details, it sounds like.
That's right. So next, I've set ahead of time, because I'm a good tagging boy, unlike Taz. I've set up some tags.
Guardrails.
Set up some tags. One of which is is this instance a Nessus scanner? And I can actually filter that right at the API level, right? So this is an AWS API feature. The describe instances call is going to return all EC2 instances in the region. I can actually filter it down based off of tags, for example. Another tag that I've secretly put in there is it's a tag instance of this TIO scanner UUID. So in order to actually pass that scanner to create the scan in Tenable, I'm going to need to know what scanner I want to use, right? So I'm pulling both of those values off of AWS tags on the EC2 instance, which is something you can do automatically through something like Taz mentioned, Control Tower. Mm-hmm. You could do it through Lambda automation, very similar to the same automation that I'm viewing here, right? Like an event bridge. Hey, when a EC2 instance is created, be sure to tag it, right, with these tags. Anyway, moving on. So basically now I've already got the information that I need for the instance that I'm going to scan. I got the actual scanner instance that I'm going to use. I'm pulling the security group off of that. And then I'm going to get the scanner ID that I shoved into a tag. Okay. All this makes sense so far?
Yep.
Cool. Now, here's the call. This is all it takes. I'm going to authorize the security group for ingress, right? An inbound rule, and grant permission on port 22, which is the SSH port, to my scanner instance security group itself, right? So typically, if you've worked with security groups in the past, you might be used to, I have to give it an IP address, right? Either a local IP address or an external IP address. You can actually give security groups. Yeah. As the actual group themselves as well. Right. Kind of cool feature in AWS. So I've opened up the port basically to my Nessus scanner. And now I'm going to get my own Nessus scanner private IP address. You might be wondering why I'm doing this. This is just potentially, I actually want to comment this out. This is another alternative that I wanted to show. So let's say you didn't tag your instance, right? If you don't do anything and you set up Nessus, it will utilize the IP address on a field within Tenable called hostname. So if I uncomment this code, we can look at it real quick. So if I got the private IP address, it's going to actually set up in this IP. I can actually show you what it looks like. If I go to settings and I go to sensors, I haven't showed you this yet. And I go to linked scanners, or maybe I did show this. But look, this is the IP address of the local address for my actual Nessus scanner. I can confirm that for you here. Nothing up my sleeves, so to speak.
It's right? 179.
That's it. So basically, when Tenable registers a Nessus scanner or links it, it will utilize this as the host name if you haven't done anything else special. All right, back to it. So this is just an alternate way that you could see. I'm using this call to tio.scanners.list. So list out all my scanners. I'm going to traverse it and try and find one that is named in that convention. So this, if you didn't tag the instance, which I think just saves you an API call if you tag it anyway. Just a good way to do that. I told you, and since we're short on time, I'll skip through the part. There's plenty of documentation on the Tenable website of how to go set up a private key and upload a private key to set up credentials. But basically, again, I'm using the same thing. I've set up ahead of time a private key that is the private key that I'm going to either spin up an instance, like if we come and look, the names won't match. But you can just trust me. This is the private key that I've uploaded to Tenable and stored in the credentials area. I think is it under settings? Yeah, credentials. So you just come in here, you create a credential basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So just to kind of recap what we're doing is The reason we're doing this, if it's my understanding, is basically we're using a Nessus scanner as opposed to some of the other methods that we've talked about earlier today. And what we want to do is we want to basically, every time an instance is created, give that scanner the ability to scan the new instances, right? So we started off, once it spins up, we figure out, okay, what's the name, where's it located, what's the subnet, all of the information that we need, and also importantly the security group of it. Then we also get the security group of the scanner, and then basically we just we update the to be scanned instance, and we say, hey, give permission to the scanner to take a look under the covers or under the hood. And yeah, is that
You got it?
Got it?
You got it. That's right. Yeah. And there's yet another method that you could be utilizing here. Instead of a Nessus scanner, you could use what's called a Nessus agent, which lives on the host itself. So you would bake in the Nessus agent to the AMI that you're using, for example, spin it up with a linking key. That's another route. But what I'm doing here, we finally reached the point where I can just create the scan itself, right? Like I'm sending in all the information that we went and collected. I'm setting the template to a basic scan. There's a lot of templates. This is something we didn't talk through too deeply. Basic is just going to run a subset of the Nessus plugins that do vulnerability detection. I'm targeting that IP address, right, that we pulled off of the instance that we want to scan. And I'm using this scanner that I detected from the VPC, right, using tags in AWS. And I'm using the pre-baked credentials that I already went and uploaded via the Tenable IO UI, right? Yep. Once it's created, I just launch it. And that's it. So I already, again, deployed this too in the sake of time, right? So let's see this working. You want to see this working?
I'd love to.
Of course we do.
I'm just kidding. It doesn't work.
Just for us to walk away and be like, "Yep, it works."
No, it doesn't work. Actually,
I mean that's kind of about how well my demo went.
This is all theory. Let's actually spin up Red Hat, right? This is a throwback to Chris, right? So Chris taught us earlier that Red Hat doesn't have the SSM agent installed automatically, right? So
this would be a perfect case.
Yeah, we if you're using frictionless, you don't necessarily you have to have SSM agents deployed out on your instances themselves to take advantage of frictionless assessments. But in the case that you don't, here's what we can do, and it's literally just review and launch. It'll ask me which key pair I want to use. Cool. Launching that instance. Oh, okay. This is
can't do a T2 micro.
But good job trying to be frugal.
Yeah, right. Oh, for some reason it's got SQL Server installed on it. I don't want that one. I just want the regular one. Yes. I just want regular.
Just the regular, please. A small.
I have nothing against SQL Server. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, cool.
That looked like it worked.
Let's see if my mad scientist scripting has done anything. Also, I'm not a Python dev, PS. That's why I didn't do any of this live, because it would have been really, really sad. And you would have been like, why is this guy writing Python like it's C# or something? But I'm learning. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Let's look at the timestamp. No, this is from earlier, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, it's 12:31. I mean,
if you do want to play with the Tenable Python library, right, that you've been messing around with, where can they find that?
Yeah.
There's the new one.
Yeah, I saw some. So there's two places. You can actually find it on GitHub itself, right? And then there's also a read the docs, which I'm told is like a Python thing. Python people actually are nice, and not to say that other people in other languages aren't, but they have like this whole documentation site called Read the Docs for cool. Python libraries. I don't know. I've learned a lot about Python in the past 2 months or so.
Cool.
Oh, and look, Mo is confirming.
We do. Nice.
Anyway, back to it. Let's see.
Mo's just here to make sure that this event bridge thing goes through, you know?
Hey, look, I didn't get any errors. Okay,
There
so
you
that's
go.
a good sign. That's a very good sign, actually. So if I go back to my scans, we should have something running that I didn't kick off at all for an instance that didn't exist. There we go.
Pending.
Here we go.
Look
Look.
into it. Let's see when it was.
Well, it hasn't actually started running yet. So
Oh.
Scheduled.
the scanning does take
Scheduled.
some time,
Gotcha.
but it's done. Like from a Tenable,
Pending. It's ready. Yeah.
from a Tenable perspective, you're good. You're good to go. You will get information, and if we go look, we could probably confirm. Yeah, 215, right? And look, 215.
5. Yep.
Go.
All right. Okay, that sounds pretty good. See, no data found yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now it's running though. It's transitioned into running. Let's go back to the scans.
I guess it would be hard to scan the instance if the instance hasn't even like
Running.
gone live yet.
That's probably
A little bit difficult.
Yeah, but let's see.
You
Go
all
ahead.
have time travel and stuff, as we discussed earlier in the episode, so I don't know why.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look. So you can tell by the severity level info. Info is basically this is the actual Cloud9. Remember, we kicked off earlier a scan of my Cloud9 instance through the API that we created, not the Tenable API. Well, both, right? But you can tell by this blue severity info. These are just informational. This means that there's nothing wrong here. This is just telling you about the scan. So, for example, right here. This actually failed. Something I set up incorrectly failed to SSH into my my Cloud9 instance. So this will tell you, for example, did I have a credentialed scan or an uncredentialed scan? And even though I sent credentials, whatever I sent it didn't work. So that's called Alan Michael error.
Click on the output. Do it. Do it.
What's the output?
Failed to use the public key authentication.
And again, that's me setting it up incorrectly because that happens.
Yep.
But again, this happens a lot because networking is hard. Networking's hard, right? So if you do encounter something like this and you can't figure it out, you think you've got the credentials set up correctly, the best way to come in and troubleshoot that I found and I've been told is to actually log into your Nessus host if you're running Nessus, for example, and try and SSH into the instance that you're trying to scan. And if you can't do it, that's step one, right? That means you haven't set it up correctly. If you can, something else is going on. You might have, formed the credentials incorrectly or uploaded the wrong key. There's all kinds of human error that happens that we can do. Wonder if
I bet you it was a sudo issue because hey, the sudo.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you got that one. That's good. That looks good.
Yeah, this looks like a credentialed scan to me, right?
They definitely worked. Yep.
Yeah, look, see, we can see from that info right here. Valid credentials provided. So I set that up correctly. Good for me. Anyway, but yeah, we're actually seeing vulnerabilities here, aren't we?
We are.
And this is probably because we have yet to run yum update, or I guess that's yum is the package manager for Red Hat, isn't it?
It is. But I also think it also just means you're hungry right now, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Dinner time.
Anyways, so what do you think? What questions do you have?
Yeah, does anyone in chat, if anyone has any questions, please chime in here in the last few minutes.
Have I piqued your curiosity? What would you build with these? That's another thing too. I'm always looking for I'll call them starter templates or things to build for people who want to use Tenable. So if you've got something that you think would be a great workflow or you're interested in building, let me know and maybe I'll build it. So yeah.
I think this is awesome. I mean, you both, between you and Chris, you hit, Chris covered like, well, what if we already have a bunch of deployed EC2 instance already? How can we start using Tenable, right? SSM, we got a little bit of a inception going on there. It's all good. But
Sorry.
yeah, what do we use if we already have like a bunch of EC2 instances deployed? Well, we got, SSM that already has the agent installed on those, so you can already start using it right away. Or, say you want to, scan it on as it gets spun up, right? Maybe you're starting development and you're starting to build out that production environments, right? Then you can go to Lambda. So I like that you both covered, the two main scenarios, which is we're existing or we're spinning something else up. Either way, you're covered.
We also didn't cover because actually this is Tenable's second time. Oh, did I freeze? No, I'm here. Okay.
No, you're here.
This is Tenable's second time on Howdy Partner, so thank you again for having us. But the first time, Will and Tim, they covered web application scanning as well. So that's another product that Tenable offers. So if you're building web applications and you want to scan for OWASP type vulnerabilities against your web application before you send it out to production. You can go check out that old episode too. And then I think they also covered maybe a build pipeline scenario too. I don't remember. Did you end up watching that episode, Chris? Not to put you on the spot. I watched it.
I haven't, but Will is one of my good buddies. And I know that he's big into promoting automation in terms of scanning web applications during build pipelines. So I could imagine that was pretty interesting.
I see we got Alex Smasha who dropped by.
Yeah.
Alex.
It's an old face.
Yeah. And I have I've moved over to a partner company from the partner network to a company in the partner network. That's where I'm at now.
So with that, I think we're at time. I haven't seen any questions filter in yet, but AM, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. Sharon, did we miss something here, AM?
I forgot. There's one more thing I wanted to show.
Okay, yeah.
Totally forgot. I totally didn't even think about this. Let me share my screen one last time. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Because I spent some good time on this too.
Of course, you can't go without notice if you spend time on it.
All right, this is for my friends who are going to go take they're going to go take what I have started you off with, and I'll post these basic functions that I've created here too to my link or my LinkedIn, my GitHub, whatever, my GitHub as well. But I've already got you up to the races too. If you've ever heard of Lambda, you may have heard of Lambda layers. The 5-second explanation of what a Lambda layer is oftentimes you need to package dependencies up across thousands of functions, right? And the way to do that traditionally is to zip those libraries into the deployment packages themselves, which makes managing libraries pretty difficult, right? Like across thousands and thousands of functions. So I've already set you up. If you want to utilize PyTenable as a Lambda layer, you can go deploy. This will run an automation through GitHub Actions that essentially comes in and builds out a PyTenable Lambda layer with the latest version of PyTenable into basically this list of regions, which are the supported regions when I wrote this for Lambda layers. And then you pull out the ARN that comes back, you drop that into your Lambda function. You don't have to package PyTenable inside your actual function code then, like into the package that you deploy to AWS Lambda, to your function, essentially. Sorry, super fast explanation of that, but hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, I love Lambda layers. How do you all feel about Lambda layers?
I think Mo said it best. It's
Absolutely.
Buttery croissant layers. Lambda and its buttery croissant layers.
Anyway,
All
I
right.
love that.
So we posted the GitHub link down in there for you to be able to follow or pull down AM's repo there. So go ahead and go ahead and get to it. And at this point, we'll go ahead and start to sign off a little bit. So thank you all for joining our stream where we were able to talk about vulnerability scanning and manageability with Tenable. AM, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Now, AM obviously knows this. Chris, when we signed off, we got 3 phrases that we choose from. We got y'all come back now, happy trails, or oh my goodness,
Giddy
what is
up.
the other one?
Giddy up.
And so, Chris, if you'd like to be able to choose one, on the count of 3, we'll all be able to say that and sign off there.
Yeah, I want y'all come back now.
All right,
Yes.
Here we go. So from Howdy Partner to you all, 3, 2, 1.
Y'all come back now. You hear?
You all take care. Bye, everyone.
See
See
ya.
you guys. Thanks.